Happy New Year, humans. It is the first episode of 2021. So if you're listening to this message, you survived 2020. You rock. Congratulations. Man, that was quite a year. But welcome to episode 37 of the Human Music Podcast, Missing Lynx Teaches Music, where we interview Missing Lynx, who teaches music on his channel, Missing Lynx Teaches Music on YouTube. He also builds phase plant instruments with his company Boombox Crush. You'll want to look out for them. And in this episode, we go into his company Boombox Crush, phase plant and why you should use it, the importance of preparation and reaching out to production mentors, and how much theory and psychoacoustics producers should learn how to use. Shouts out to our sponsors, big ups to the Producer Dojo, where you still have a few days left to join the Remix Your Life Challenge. It saved my life as a producer when I remixed my life in 2018, and I highly recommend you do the same. Links in the description. Remix your life today. Also, Gvngaroo Records, Gvngaroo, best place for music distribution. Under $10, unlimited distribution. Go get it. Now, also, the approach with Seth Drake. He revolutionized all of the hosts, all our mixing approach. The approach class is hands down the best and the best value for mixing and mastering education. He knows what he's doing. He's mixed for all the stars, and you can read all about it in the link in the description below for all three of those awesome sponsors. Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? Back at you with another Human Music Podcast. This week, we have on our good friend Alex, aka Missing Lynx. He has a YouTube channel, Missing Lynx Teaches Music, and we're gonna get right into talking about that right now because we were just talking about it. And as I often say at the beginning of these, we were talking about something off air and realized why. Press record already, dudes.
Literally always happens. My favorite too is like we'll stop recording with a guest and then we'll just get on some like really deep philosophical stuff that's like super choice. And like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that happened with Seta the other week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Unk too.
But yeah, thank you for coming on the show, man. Why don't you tell the people at home a little bit about yourself, and then if you can remember where we left off in our little YouTube conversation, pick up from there.
Yeah, word. I totally got you. So my name is Missing Lynx. I've been making music for a minute. I guess I've been producing for about almost 11 years now, 10 or 11 years. And before that, I was, dabbling in all these instruments, but I'd gotten out of music for like 7 years before that. So when I was a kid, I always thought it was amazing. I wanted to do it, but didn't think it was available. And so I went to school to get a good job. I got a degree in corporate finance and worked in private equity and all that stuff. Was miserable, and found music. It saved my life yet again. And then I realized, I can make a life out of this. And, I quit grad school. I was getting my PhD and I quit that to just do music full time. That was 2.5 years ago about now. So that's kind of how I got here. But I love teaching. I've always loved teaching. I was teaching when I was doing economics and all that stuff. And I love teaching music. And my personal mission in this world is to make the world a better place through music and to help people find self-expression through music. Help those people who ought to be doing music get there, because I know that I wasted years of my life and was depressed and miserable, not doing what I should have done, feeling like that door was closed to me. Either I was too old or I was, it's just it's not a viable career, or all these other stories that I made up about it. that kept me from actually doing what brings me so much joy now.
Hell yeah, man.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Your mission is so it's just dialed. It's just wholesome and exactly what this world needs. So
Well, thank you.
yeah, definitely, man.
Totally. Do you want to talk a bit about what that transition looked like and sort of what was that moment where you figured out this was viable, and how did you sort of take that scary first step?
You know, it was so funny. It was so funny because I was so removed from my ability to make artistic choices, right? That like when I first got into it, it wasn't even like my idea. My buddy was like, dude, we should like download Ableton or something. And I was just like, okay, yeah, let's do it. I was like so excited because like I resonated so much with it, but I couldn't like make that choice myself. And I remember when I first got into it, like I was always seeking other people to like validate my choices, to like give me the direction, because I had so much hesitation to choosing for myself. Because, you know, I had gone into this life, like I said, getting a good job and doing all these things that I was quote unquote supposed to do and not really making any choices for myself. So, through the process of getting into music, and I started, the first thing I did is I bought a drum, like this badass African drum from this drum maker in Washington, D.C. And I just played that every day. And, you know, my background was in concert band. I played French horn, and I didn't like, you know, so I approached it completely different. I wasn't worried about the notes. I was just like, what are the sounds I'm creating? Then I like bought a piano and started playing and improvising every day. And it was through that process of playing every day and not reading sheet music, not playing other people's music, just like messing around and just grinding out, making my own choices like thousands of times a day, that like I finally taught myself to live for myself and like from my heart. And it really made all the difference in the world in my life, because like I said, before that, I was doing all this stuff that I was supposed to do, ignoring what I really needed. And I was miserable. Like I was absolutely miserable. And so through music and the practice of music, I really learned to listen to myself. And that's why, you know, I went on this mission, is because I want to give that to other people who are stuck, shackled by this life they think they're supposed to live when they're not even listening to what their heart is screaming at them to do.
Dude, absolutely. And yeah, we here on the Human Music Podcast like to do what other podcasts don't, because every time someone's like, I transitioned from corporate this to making music, or I went from being an amateur to touring the world, it's just like a snap of the fingers and it happened. We like to get into the details here at the HMP. So if you don't mind, what were the actual nitty-gritty details of you transferring over into doing music? Like, what were some of your income sources, and like how did you like really like make that gap work?
Yeah, for sure. So first, for the first handful of years, I was still working my corporate finance and economics jobs. Right. I was working for a private equity fund. I was getting paid quite well during that. And then I ultimately left that and spent more time doing music, but I really was looking for, I still hadn't convinced myself that music was a viable like life. It was like something that I would do in addition to my, you know, corporate career. But then I left, you know, the office to get my PhD in economics. That's how I came out here to Colorado. I went to University of Colorado in Boulder for my PhD. And I was getting paid to go to school. If you ever get a chance to get paid to go to school, definitely do it. It's awesome. Yeah, because I was teaching, right? So it was part of my funding. And so the next bunch of years, I was doing that for 7 years. I did not get my PhD over 7 years because I wasn't writing my dissertation. I was writing music. But I was also teaching a lot, right? I was doing tutoring like at like $50 an hour cash, which is awesome. And then I was also getting a stipend of, depending on where my funding was, anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month. And so that was enough to live in all those sorts of things. pretty comfortably and didn't take that much time and left time for music. So I did that all up until about 2.5 years ago now. And since then, I've been living off of little scraps of money that I get in a handful of different ways. Still not making much money through music, but that's going to change with Boombox Crush. And teaching, tutoring, right? Overwhelmingly like music and stuff like that. And then also living off of savings and what I inherited from my father when he passed away. So it's enough to get me by for a little bit still. And, we've got, like I said, Boombox Crush, a new company. We've got all this stuff coming up for it. And, the pacing's right. So it should start working out.
Yeah.
All right.
Ooh.
So now I'm 100% bought in on figuring out what is Boombox Crush, and could you run us down like the inception of that, and which
Boombox Crush.
direction you're going with this new venture?
Absolutely. So Boombox Crush. So you all, I think you all know my boy Gridham. He's also a member of the producer Dojo, Ethan Reese, super amazing soul.
He's had some good questions that we've gone in depth on the podcast.
Yeah, and you may also know Dan. He's Lemoyne. He's another member of the Dojo, and so he's the third member of Boombox Crush. But we started this company at the beginning of this year, and it's been a wild ride. But partly the goal is to make just the best shit, right? Like we don't want to make anything that we wouldn't love to use. Like all the stuff that we've been putting together, we're just doing everything in our arsenal to make everything as powerful and flexible and good as possible. Right. And so that's the philosophy of Boombox Crush. Is every single thing that we put together should be next level. And the goal is to up the game of music for everybody. Right. So like literally, cutting edge synthesizers, developing brand new techniques no one's ever seen before to get like really, really powerful. We don't even think about them as presets. We think about them as like building instruments. So like, for example, we've been focusing on phase plant a lot because it's just so incredible. And if you know anything about phase plant, you know that you can route everything how you want. You've got like 8 macro knobs. You've got like what's like Ableton racks inside of there, like these snap heaps and multi-passes. And so one of the ways my YouTube channel came up is I did a lot of rack programming and building all these devices and like creating really complex stuff because I'm a programming nerd. That's like my other background is a programming nerd. So, we've been taking that and going like deep into phase plant and just, we'll spend like 4 to 5 hours on a preset, right? Like on one preset, right? And it's like these whole worlds of sound that you can explore. Like every knob has like all sorts of action on it. There's more knobs and everything exposed on the snap heaps and multi-passes. And then like everything that we can do from like closing all the stuff that's not important to use. Like, so it makes the process for the user really intuitive. Like we always draw the attention to what is most useful, make sure there's a lot of flexibility. Everything sounds amazing. And then instead, like I said, given that it's supposed to be this whole world of sound, we're also putting together this one-shot pack, right, to power the sample oscillators. We've been building wavetable packs out of like animals and like, all these things to power the wavetable oscillators. We have like over 150 LFOs, right? And we're putting this all together in this bundle called Evolution, right? And we're dropping that pretty much any day now. We actually submitted it to the Kilohertz people, and they like lost their shit about it. They're like, "This is amazing," but they basically they pay people off like one-off payments. They don't give you royalties, but they're gonna hit it. They said that they love it. They're gonna promote it on all their socials. That they are gonna hire us out to make one of their content bake packs in the future.
Sick.
Sidecar Tommy from Beats Antique, he put a bunch of our presets in this new track he's putting together. He used like 3 out of the 4 phase plant presets that he used came from our pack, and he picked them not. He said he picked them not because he was trying to use ours, but just because they were better, right? And so like that's kind of our design philosophy. It's how good can we make it, right? How can we make every single thing that we put together? And so that's what Boombox Crush is about. And it's about education, right? Helping everybody up music to the next level, right? So we give away our secrets on how we even did this stuff. That's like another thing that comes with evolution, is this little like synthesis course where we like show all these techniques and stuff that we developed along the way. And just to, up the game of music, right? That's what we're about, is making the world a better place through music. And, hopefully like making this place more beautiful, more inspired, and getting people the tools that they need to like keep pushing the next wave of sound forward.
Love it, man. That's awesome. Do you feel like going down that rabbit hole has like changed stuff in your workflow as far as your own personal music, aside from like actually using those presets? Like, do you feel like that process of creating those patches has also influenced the way that you're just going about like putting together songs?
Yes and no. The reason no is because I've been at this game for a little while. Like I used to do I still do like a ton of like deep Ableton rack programming. Like I've got racks that do all sorts of stuff, and you can get like, not all of them, but tons of them on my channel for free. Like I'll deconstruct how I built them. I give them away, but tons of MIDI processing racks that do awesome stuff. Yeah, it just goes on and on. Something about like the way the engineering of it all, I love. And so I've done so many, nighttime sessions building these devices, and then I use them in my production. And when I'm producing, I try and get out of engineering mode, right? Like, no, I'm like always like, let's focus on the emotion of the tracks. Let's focus on like, the feels and like staying in the creative zone, right? But having those tools that intimately that can do things, whether it's take a stack of MIDI notes and strum it out like you're strumming a guitar or something, right? In like a really flexible way. So you can like automate the knob, so you can like strum it out in like a way that feels organic real fast, right? It's like, as one example, or like I'll have racks where you can start with one note and like end up with like whole things, like whole like chord progressions with melody lines and stuff, with like, velocity articulation and like, note length changes and all this stuff. And so my process for a long time has been using the tools that I've developed to do stuff that a lot of people would take forever to do. And then the flip side of that is, I've been studying music theory and everything for years. I like jazz theory and all this stuff. I played bunches of instruments. And so the tools are built to enhance my knowledge of theory and get really musical outcomes as opposed to more experimental outcomes. So I have devices that do that too, right? So that's basically a long-winded answer to say now Faceplant's just the next level, and now I've got all these snap heaps and multi-passes that I've made, right? I've got all these presets that do dozens and dozens of different things, and so it's the same kind of process, it's just better tools. And, my sounds are more precise, more evolving, and it gets done way faster because, it's just better tools and more of them.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what's up. Just kind of going back to proving the point over and over again in your life that if you take that time to do the preparation and really make sure, like, whether it's taking the time to like learn about the actual musicality behind the theory and like why certain chords or certain notes will fit well together, or how to evoke a certain emotion with different patterns, or whether it's like really taking the time in a nighttime session, as you mentioned, to really make an instrument be extremely flexible and get the intimate knowledge of how you can work it and how you can manipulate it, so that then when you do come to that writing session, you can stay focused on the emotion, the theme, the story you're telling through the music, and just utilize all of that preparation that puts a lot of power at your fingertips.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, like I've been producing for almost 11 years, but I would say my first 5 to 6 years feel almost wasted because of not doing that. Right. Like I'd write tracks. I would try and like make masterpieces, had no idea what I was doing, no idea why I couldn't get them to sound good. And just not doing that prep work. It took forever and it was very demoralizing. So yeah, now approaching it that way where, I have an organized sample library with everything I need, right? I've got all these tools I've built. I've learned so much. I mean, like I know everything about Ableton inside and out. And doing that so that when you get in the DAW, you can actually create beautiful art quickly, right? And not get burnt out. So yeah, it makes all the difference.
Yeah. Go for it, Rip.
Say there's nothing better than when you actually have like a tool or a rack or something that allows minimal creative input to spark something that's actually like amazing and catches your interest. Because that's honestly the hardest thing for me, is to go from blank page to having something that grabs me enough that I'm like, yeah, there's a whole song here. Like it takes like now, like the bar continually goes up, obviously, right? Like as you start to make better music, you start to like, your threshold for like, is this turn it into a songable goes up. But having instruments like you were just describing, it sound very elaborate, very musical, very, very fun to play with minimal input, right? Like one or two keys produce like a whole melodic structure. It just makes the process go way easier because you start with something that's interesting and evolving, right? I love that. So it sounds like you built some amazing sounds and tools and stuff. Are there any like songs or anything that our listeners, really I'm asking for myself, should listen to after this to exemplify all these beautiful things you built?
There are, I mean, like, here's the thing is like pretty much most of them, some of the songs are a little bit more, you could say constructed in a vanilla way, but like most of them have some degree of like using these tools. But they're so transparent because like I said, a lot of the times it's, I use it with my theory background and I like to make really, like melodic driven music, stuff that's what you might call like well constructed in terms of like theory and notes and harmony and things like that. I do a bunch of sound design too, and you'll see that in there too. But when you hear it, you won't necessarily notice it, right? Just because, like, for instance, like, and I can point. It's easy. It would be better to point you to videos that I've made showing the process, and then you can get the racks too. But like, for instance, sometimes like, I'll give you one example.
Okay.
Right. So I'll take oftentimes a single note, or I'll take like one note per chord, right? And I will split that up. I'll have this whole chain of MIDI effects, but I'll split that up into chords and melodies, right? And then I will take, velocity racks, note length plugins, other things like that. And then I'll also use MIDI racks to split across these notes so that maybe it's just like, I have it split into chords up, an octave up, and then also some bass notes down there. And I don't treat the bass notes, but I do treat the top notes, right? And then I'll start automating the drive knob. Like as it goes through arpeggiators, I like, automate the arpeggiator, but not in like the arpeggiator patterns, but not in like a random way. Like when I want to accent, maybe I'll like automate it to the chord trigger so you get these stabs. And then here's a really good trick. So there's this note retrigger in Ableton's arpeggiator, where every time you get a new note coming on, it retriggers the pattern, right? And so if you do anything that starts at the top, right, whether it's like downward or you just like switch the offset so it starts at the top note, then you can track the melody lines. And so every time you insert a new melody note in the top of this, right, it will play through this pattern. And so you've got all these melody notes at the top. So I'll use that. And then I'll also automate the drive knob on a velocity, right? The note length. I'll automate the note lengths on these things as well. And depending on the groove I'm going for. So if it's like a short, like long, short kind of thing, right? I will unlink the automation in the clip, right? And have it loop, like whether it's like a bar or something, even though the whole phrase might be 8 bars, but where it's just like doing those grooves. Same thing with like the velocity, right? I'll do that and I'll put in the velocity accent pattern that I want. And then I'll link that. And then you can also unlink it and then it'll copy it all out. And then I can make syncopations right inside of it. And so I'll start with one note and I'll literally end up with something that sounds like it was like meticulously crafted note by note, but it's really constructing it from the ground up, from what are the fundamentals of groove in terms of note length, like patterns and articulations, where do the melody notes line, like how am I accenting it, and then how am I deviating from those patterns. And sometimes, like I said, I'll do that all just in like automating MIDI devices. And then sometimes I'll play it on keyboard. I mean, I play piano every day. I've played it every day for like 10 years. Like I have no reason not to do that as well. But some of the stuff that I come up with, it's just very different. It's in some ways, you can get different results and you can get them fast, much faster than you could trying to actually edit this directly. Right.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of one example. And
yeah, the tool you're writing with can completely change the outcome of what's written.
Yeah. And I mentioned this other device that I have, but it's just like it's an arpeggiator on free mode. And then it just goes through the cycle once and it typically goes up, but you can go down too. And it's all like mapped in a rack. But then I use that to like strum out chords. So sometimes I'll write guitar lines and it's like going down, up and down and up. And like sometimes it'll like go down, where it like really spaces out the notes. But what I'm doing is I'm actually like automating these knobs and automating the pattern from going up and down, like how I would actually want it strummed, like down, 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 up, kind of thing. And then I can automate the knob and that automates like how spread out these strums are, right? So sometimes they're really dense strums where it's like almost all happening at the same time. Or sometimes, it's like 30 milliseconds or more between each note. So yeah, a lot of things like that. But like I said, when you hear it, you won't even hear it in my music so much because it comes out sounding really natural, right? I really like an organic sound. I use a lot of organic instruments. And I like the performances to feel like very human.
Man, I love that. I know a huge turning point for me production-wise was realizing that a lot of these like professional sounding compositions are actually just like happy accidents or not as hard as you'd think to actually achieve.
Yeah.
So I love that. And man, you answered like every question I had prepared, like just in that explanation of that. And I love that because I think that opens up people's eyes to a lot of what's possible. And like, you talked about, you have this like extensive theory background and like 10, 11 years of music. And it's like, even then you still use these tools more so and just generate stuff on a blank canvas and sort of sift through that, much like a DJ would pick tracks for their set. You sort of generate stuff or, you have these ideas of what you want in mind. And then it's just like, you have these options available that you just tweak. Which I love. I wanted to ask, do you feel like your music has changed sonically since you started doing these things, or is it just more so to like get to that end result quicker?
I mean, it definitely has. There's like, so I have this track called Release, for instance, and the way I made this rack is I had this like tricked out 128, right? And so any of the viewers who don't know, it's there's it's a sampler and you've got all these different samples, and the way it's usually constructed is you can select through them based off of what note you send at it. But another way to send it up is that you can select through it based off of a sample selector knob, and then what note you play will shift the pitch. So if you get all the samples in their tune, like everything that's D, you set the root note to D, then you can automate the sample selector knob, and every note, it will be like a different sound, right? And there's a bunch of stuff to get that to work, because some sounds are wide and some sounds are narrow, and some sounds like, don't have enough of an articulation. But, what I did is it's like a shaper, like a, saturation kind of thing in the sampler. So there's like a shaper knob and an FM knob, and you can use that to add in and make sure all the notes are articulated right. I used mid-side compression, right? So compressing the mids and the sides to control the width, right? And get things to be a little bit more tame in that way. And so there's this bass line that's really all of these shots. I didn't do the sound design on them. I think it's from like a Black Octopus pack or something. But like all these sounds, and I'm like automating this sample knob, doing all these automations on this shaper knob and this FM knob to get it articulated and swelling and growling and like balanced. And it's got this gnarly, like evolving timbre while it's like playing out like melody lines and like, all this kind of shit. So I would never have ever known how to do that until I got deep into the rack programming and everything like that. So there's definitely tactics that I use that yield way, way different results than I ever did before. But also it's kind of hard to separate because, I used to suck so much at music. I mean, compared to how I do now, like I listen to my old tracks and I'm like, what was I thinking? Right.
Classic.
But
never thought that about myself.
No, not once. I'm exempt. Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's like a parallel evolution of my gaining the programming skills, my gaining all this knowledge, and then my production game going up drastically for sure, right? And it's definitely causal, right? But the sound has been only so much impacted in some ways because, like I said, a lot of times I'm going for a more organic feel. And it's just quicker, better execution, better tools, definitely like much cooler articulations and, embellishments. And it's definitely impacted my sound over and over again, but it's not like Mr. Bill where, he's like building these crazy devices on the fly to get these weird glitchy outcomes you would never come up with and stuff. I have done stuff like that here, there in tracks too, but usually I'm going for something that's a little bit less experimental in some ways.
That's what's up. Now, from our previous conversation, you mentioned, reaching out to different people to, to find mentorship and, instruction from people that, that you admire and that know how to do things that you didn't at the time. And I'd love to hear, kind of your thoughts on that process and your journey through that, who you've worked with and why you chose them.
Yeah, definitely. So, first off, everybody watching this, definitely find a number of great instructors of different skill sets, right? And don't be afraid to go outside your box. So I learned theory, like music theory, from a jazz guitarist and composer, right? And so jazz theory is like some of the most advanced, theory out there. I've trained composition with this woman who writes operas, right? And she doesn't know anything about music production and like the way she goes about stuff. Once she gave me an assignment and I was supposed to write a song about, my breakup with my girlfriend. And it was like, she drew on a piece of paper, like how the voices are supposed to spread out. And then she like scribbles and it's like, then it dissolves into chaos and then it merges into birds on the other side. And she's like, go for it. And, it was awesome. I wrote one of my best tracks ever.
You're like, I got a rack for that.
What?
Like, I got a rack.
This one,
the birds rack. Let me throw that on. Yeah.
Yeah. This one's, it's so personal. I don't like share it with basically anyone. It's not posted anywhere. I probably played it for like 5 human beings or something like that, or 6 human beings. But it's like really powerful. I used a lot of freak show industry stuff in the chaotic parts, like Dumpster Fire and Black Mask, if you know those. But yeah, so, you know, and that's the thing, is I would never have gotten that from like training with Dylan at the Producer Dojo, who, you know, he's obviously an amazing instructor. I learned a lot of my rack programming from him and got started with rack programming from Dylan. I still train with KJ Saka every other week, which I've been doing for, I think like almost 2 years now. We've been training together for a while, but, you know, he's taught me so much about drum programming and like, you know, the way I think about drums and rhythm and like drum synthesis. Like he got me into drum synthesis and like just going super deep on that. I train every other week with Sidecar Tommy from Beats Antique. That's been going on for almost a year now. And he's on the complete flip side of the spectrum, right? He's like, what's the emotion of everything, right? He's approaches mixing as strictly an emotional endeavor, right? Like he's just like, what's like the story of the song? Like, and he'll tell these like wild stories. Like, I have this song called Hidden Dragon, and he's like, you know, talking about this like dragon that's sleeping and that it comes out of the cave. And it's like, you know, this whole narrative that I didn't necessarily like think of, but totally fits. Right. And then he's like talking about how he doesn't like the end because it like feels like you're in this battle with this dragon, or maybe you are the dragon. Right. And that like at the end of it just seems like then he just like walks away and it's just like peace. Right. It just like doesn't seem like the right thing for him to have done. And like the imagery with which he like thinks about that. Obviously, you know, his music's amazing. Right. And people love it. So that's really been helpful, staying in like the emotional space for music, staying in the emotional space for mixing. And on the subject of mixing, I'm also in the approach with Seth Drake, who is Bass Nectar and other people's mix and master engineer, Gucci Mane, bunches of people. He's a legend. And oh man, I learned so much there too. But the moral of the story is there's people who are really, really great, like, you know, the best in, you know, at what they're doing. And those are the best people to learn from and learn from everybody else, because everybody's got a little bit of that in their own like realm of expertise. So I believe that we all have so much to learn from each other and so much to teach each other. And definitely seek as many instructors as you can, train closely and deeply with, you know, a handful of them. And yeah, that's repeatedly changed my game over and over again.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I want to talk a bit about like, so like,
While you're formulating that, just want to let everybody know that links to both Seth Drake and Il Gates' Producer Dojo will be down in the comments, because for real, go get that mentorship. What were you saying, Tesco?
man, so like, I feel like a lot of this has been answered in some ways, but I guess like, so if you were working with somebody and they came to you for mentorship, like what's one misconception that people think, you know, when they're producing, that's way more important than it actually is, and they end up investing, sinking all this time into? And then, you know, now that you're 10, 11 years deep into this journey, obviously, you know, you've talked a lot about generation through creating tools and having your library ready and all these things. But is there, you know, what sort of course would you lead that producer on to get them focused onto the right things to make those leaps and bounds in their creative process and their workflow?
Oh man, that's a tough question for a couple of reasons. First, I would say that I think that everybody like has their own things that they over focus on, right? And I don't know if over focus is even the right word, because it contributes to their sound, right? So like I didn't get into sound design until like later in the game, right? You know, like not really deep into it until like I had been producing for like probably 6 years. Whereas Gridham, my boy Ethan, that's where he started off, and he was just like sound design, sound design, sound design. And you listen to his tracks, and the sound design is amazing, right? And he definitely does amazing work for Boombox Crush, right? But he just went super deep on sound design, and that left him gaps, right? Whereas me, I've spent a lot of time focusing on learning instruments, learning theory, studying music from around the world, and that has thoroughly influenced my sound. But I love it, and there's definitely things that I would have told younger Alex, dude, you got to start focusing on these things now, right? Do this early, right? But I wouldn't necessarily say that I was over focusing on the other things. I say that it was more, what is it that I'm not focusing on that I ought to be? So to answer that second part of the question is, don't worry about the over focusing, but make sure you're not neglecting important parts of your game. And the most important parts of your game are definitely preparation, like having, your like a well-maintained sample library, knowing how to use your tools, and not like going overboard. Like ask people what the good tools are, people you trust who know, like what a few good tools are, like a couple good synths, right? Like, things like that. And like, you can use the stock EQs, stock compressors. It doesn't matter. Know how to use your compressors, know how to use your EQs. So yeah, don't neglect mixing. Don't neglect basic sound design, like tweaking patches, learning like what envelopes are, right? LFOs, how modulation works, right? So you can at least modify patches, even if you're not building them from the ground up right away. I personally think that theory is important, and knowing how to break the rules of theory is important, but knowing, how harmony works, you don't always have to use harmony. Like, you don't even have to always have chords and stuff going on, but knowing how that stuff works, like harmony is the biggest driver of emotions in music, right? The way I like to talk about it is, if like your lead sounds are like the plot, the harmonic underpinnings, even if it's just like hints of harmony, like a little note here and a little note there, it doesn't have to be like chords or sustained chords, but the harmony is like the setting. And if you really examine, good movies, good books, good everything like that, the plot is actually not what makes these things so good. It's the setting. Right? You look at Star Wars, it's like, yeah, there's some rebellion and, Darth Vader and Luke, I'm your father and all this stuff. But really, it's the Star Wars universe, or it's like the Harry Potter universe, or it's like, it's these richly imagined worlds. Even like Game of Thrones, like all the White Walkers and stuff. The White Walker threat is actually part of the setting. Right, the White Walkers only come like 4 or 5 seasons deep, right? It's the existing political turmoil and like the political, though, that was pre-existing, and then plot elements play out from that setting. So when you have a really good harmonic motion, like when you move people through like these different emotional states, you can almost have like any melody line. Like you can have almost any plot inside the right setting, and it'll still turn out like amazing, right? And it'll translate. People will like feel what you're going for, and we're so programmed. That's so programmed into us, whether it's from classical music, jazz, rock and roll, or electronic music. Like wherever you've been listening to music, like we know how these things make us feel, even if we don't know why they make us feel that way. So if you learn it, and it's super easy, there's really only like 7 chords you need to know. But if you learn those 7 chords, like you learn them, like you get to know them like you know your best friend, right? It's like you have an experience of them, like a qualitative, personal connection to them, right? Such that you'll know how they show up in different circumstances, what they're good at, what they're not good at, like where they seem awkward or where they might surprise you. If you can build that qualitative relationship with just those 7 chords, then you can do anything, right? And a lot of people are like, oh man, there's like all of this stuff and there's all these rules and I don't know. I just want to make music. So I would say don't neglect theory either. It's much easier. I've got a bunch of videos on that topic in particular on my channel if you're looking for it.
That is Missing Lynx Teaches Music, just again for anybody about to do their Googles.
In the description.
And free racks and other tools. I've got like free sample packs and it goes on and on.
Yes.
But so I would say, don't neglect any of the major bases, which is, theory, composition, which is the tricky one because it's like, but sound design, mixing, and keep asking about or other people what they think is useful and never think, oh, I don't need to know that. Like, I don't need to know that. It's good to know a little bit about everything. And you might not have to go super, super deep, right? But you definitely want to know a little bit about everything because until you do, you don't know how much you're missing and how much it will improve your game.
Yeah, as far as theory goes, I mean, even just the basics of knowing how to pick out, what scale you're writing in. Be like, oh, these notes sound good. I like this melody. And then being able to take that extra step of, I'm writing in G minor. Yeah. Like that right there is such a huge help. Yeah. Like, even if that's as far as you can go in theory in short order, like that right there, like not knowing that and then knowing that made a huge difference in my ability to write efficiently.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all of these, you like understanding like the rules that bound the universe. Like if you really like, for instance, Nero's music, which is a very personal example there. I couldn't live without their music. Why don't you take a look at their music and see what music theory guides the sound that you like, right? In that way you can deconstruct the feeling that the music provides and then see, okay, what actual note interval differences create this feeling. And that's a really important thing to develop for yourself. One thing that I found early on in my musical journey is that I really love the tension that just a half step provides in music.
Yeah.
Just one semitone. So like nothing else changes except one note goes down one semitone.
Yeah.
And you have like other movements around that. But like that movement, I found that I really like. But I only figured that out by learning some basic music theory, dissecting some stuff that I liked, seeing what was working and what didn't. One of my favorite quotes on music theory, though, is the absolute best of the best musicians say, the dead mouses of the world say, learn everything there is to know about music theory and then forget it all.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of that, being someone that obviously has learned a lot about music theory, a lot about composition, a lot about sound design, a lot about arrangement, a lot about racks, a lot about this, that, the other thing.
I'm a huge nerd. You notice from the PhD that I am a giant nerd, and that's one of my things. I feel like I need to know everything, and that too is a hindrance. It will keep me from, progressing forward when I'm just like, I need to know more. But,
right. So I'm the same way. And I run into this very often where I have like a very detailed technical thought in my head of like how something should express itself in a song or whatever. And I guess the question that I'd like to ask you is, how do you take those 11 years of knowledge on all of these different subjects from all of these high profile teachers that have instilled all of these amazing teachings into you? When you go to write music, how do you not let all of those teachings just fly through your head? And what are some things that you have found useful to just sit down and write music and let those things come out rather than thinking too hard about them?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. And the short answer is I don't think when I'm making music. Hardly at all. Like I'm super zen about it. And this is something I learned from improvising on piano every day. And when I first started with piano, I was complete shit. And the reason I was complete shit is because of my background back before any of this creating music for myself. I played French horn in a really great concert band, right? All throughout from 5th to 12th grade, we went to all these competitions, everything, it was good, but I wasn't really making any artistic choices. I was just playing the notes in front of me as well as I could play them. And that's all I was doing, right? So when I first started playing piano, I knew a little bit about theory. Like I knew essentially what a chord was, but not really like which chords to use. And I definitely didn't know how they made me feel or anything like that. Right. And I was just sucking because I was just like, oh, what should I press? What note? What note? What note? And I just sucked so bad. And the breakthrough I had was when I started treating piano like drumming. Because remember, I had started like buying myself a drum. I'm like, no, fuck this. Like, I don't need to know the notes necessarily, though it's useful. And, recognizing the patterns and anchoring the patterns in is super useful. But what's way more important is like what I'm really doing is I'm hammering in emotions, right? I'm just like knocking in emotions, like different, like playing through different emotions and getting linked up to that space. And like, how is this making me feel? How is this pushing the story forward, right? And like, getting, before I ever understood all the wave physics and all the psychoacoustics as to why these things made me feel the way I did, I got a qualitative sense of how it worked. And that's the thing is your ears are always more advanced than your brain, and your brain is always more advanced than your technical skills, whether that's what your fingers can accomplish or whether it's what you can accomplish in the DAW, right? And so trusting your ears and staying in that zone, and then when I'm going for something, I'm going from something on an intuitive, emotional level. And when I'm writing, I'm always in the emotional space of the song, right? It's just like, how do these things make me feel? Like what, I might not know what the song is about, but I'll have an intuitive sense of what it's about. And then maybe like 5 hours deep, I'm like, what is this song about? And I'm like, oh man, it's totally about like, that like fucking, whatever, like that unsettling like nervousness you get before like you do something important or whatever the fuck it is, right? But I won't necessarily know that until later, but because it resonates with me and like it's something I'm feeling, and I might not be able to put my finger on it, but I'll totally know it. And so I'm always staying in that space. I'm not thinking about the theory. That said, when I'm like, okay, this has been like this like kind of medium tense like sort of dark thing, and now I really want to kick it up a notch in darkness, right? I know from my education a dozen different ways to do that, and I know from my exploration of those things, my hands-on experience doing that, how those things are going to make me feel in advance. And so then it's really just selecting what I want, whether it's like I'm in minor and then all of a sudden I drop it to Phrygian, right? And then I'm using that half step you're talking about where it's like you go from a 1 to a flat 2, and all of a sudden it's like minor, but now you get darker than minor, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, right? And so like if I'm like already in like a dark minor place and I want to kick it up a notch, right? I know from my experience with theory and with modes and those sort of things that I can, add another flat, right? If I want to get even darker than that, like there's lots of ways. I could like flatten 5s, or I could bend notes out of that flat 2 and make them like 15 cents short so that they're even more dissonant, right? Or like, there's bunches of tricks.
I want to ask you real quick, because this personally intrigues me. I've always found that when I'm doing those kinds of moves, like how do I get more evil than evil?
Yeah.
I run into 2 issues. In most electronic instruments, synths, what have you, you just can't you can't really get away with it. And then I don't want to use a fucking violin in every song that I'm playing, right? So what are some ways in electronic music you've been able to actually deliver that like 15 cents off or like that like really dissonant tone without just making it sound like garbled?
I'm not sure that you can't get away with it with synths. I mean, you do have pitch bend, so you can bend stuff a little bit. But if you're trying to get more evil than evil, sometimes, like, a lot of it, you know, I think about storytelling and stuff like that. Sometimes it's just, how do you reset the expectations of the listener, right, in such a way that now you have somewhere to go. So it might be like you're expecting to, like, get more evil, and you might drop to nothingness, like have like some like monster growly thing in the back or something, like, you know, engage in imagery as opposed to like theory or whatever, like something that is implicitly threatening. You know, make it sound like it's in a space with you, and then you're starting with like nothing, and now you can build up from there, right? So now you've got like, you're like, break their expectations, and they're listening around for like, what the hell's going on? All they hear is like these like monsters in the distance, maybe getting closer. And then you start introducing sounds. All of a sudden that gives them a new place to interpret these sounds. So even if you're not, you know, trying to, like, you don't necessarily need to pull like these, you know, tonality tricks and these harmonic tricks, right? A lot of it is getting the expectations of the listener and reframing like what they're even, like where they're even at, and then you can get darker from there. That said, you know, when I think about harmony and dissonance, this is something that's really, really interesting, and I think about a lot. So my opera instructor had me do this. What did she call it? I can't remember what she called it, but it's basically this exercise where I did a bunch of different motifs of my name, like Alex, right? And so I did these different ones. Like I remember like my mom calling me to like food when I was like a kid, and she'd be like, Alex, right? Or like when like, you know, she was upset with me, she'd be like, Alex, right? And I started going deep and like noticing the intervals. You know, she'd like do these like major thirds and stuff to like call me into dinner, like where it's not threatening, but she's like bending like with this Alex, like just like getting right into that half step or just below half step range. And like when we have like growls in our voice, like Alex, like we get that rough, that is noise, and noise is fundamentally dissonant, right? So, you know, Dylan will talk about, you're this creature coming out of the hole, and like, you know, like there's something that's implicitly threatening about a growl. There's something implicitly threatening about a snake hiss, because not only is a hiss dissonant because it's noise, it's high-pitched noise. And as you know, like high-pitched stuff is very directional. So when something's hissing at you, it's hissing right at you. It's hissing at you, right? So it's like sending this dissonant, harsh energy, like, and it's pointed at you. So, you know, I think about the psychoacoustics of harmony and dissonance, and even just a synth, when you start adding off harmonics, or you have like one of the voices, like I said, bend slightly out of it, so it's no longer like a chord, but you're like pushing them out of them. Now, you know, the notes, the actual notes, like the 12 notes, all of them are pretty nice ratios in terms of like the frequency ratios. Like a fifth is a 3-2 ratio, an octave is a 2-1 ratio. I think the worst ratios in there are like an 11-12 ratio or something, but they're still not that like bad of ratios compared to like 768 by like 643 or something, where they're never going to be lined up. And so when they beat together, they're always like unexpectedly jagged and like shaking at you in like really dissonant, you know, kind of threatening ways. So anytime you add any of that dissonance, like when you add more presence of that dissonance, like getting it closer to you, getting it bigger, like getting your basses heavier, and like, you know, that's why dubstep's so aggressive. It's like this fucking big monster in the room with you. Like, you know, it's really bright, so it's like right up next to you, right? You know, if you get less bright, it seems farther away. And it's really big, like it's got a lot of sub bass, and sub bass implies size, because like, you know, elephants stomping around will like produce big, heavy, low bass waves, whereas like crickets are like high chirpy things, right? Because you need a lot of physical energy to produce bass waves. So from a psychoacoustic standpoint, you know, you can get more aggressive literally by thinking about like what would freak like an animal out right now if this was another animal communicating to it with sound or something like that, right? Or if you're like, you know, trying to display your anger to someone, like what are the characteristics that your voice takes on? Like if you want to be like threatening, like, and sometimes like when you want to be threatening, like maybe like you say less and you slow down and you like start articulating more and you give more space to it so that they can really like, you know, and like, you know, so sonically it could be like the same thing. Like you get a lot of stuff out of the way. You have very little except for like these aggressive sounds, big, you know, sense of space, or whatever it is, so that like you feel like you're there with it. But also imagery, like gunshot casings hitting the ground, right? Cop sirens can be threatening to some people, depending on how many laws they break on the regular. You know, but yeah, so like imagery is a big thing too. Things that like bring actual stuff to mind.
I'm so glad you brought this topic up. It's making me realize how much I've pigeonholed myself into thinking like straight theoretical stuff, and everything you're saying makes perfect sense, and it's not typically the approach that people are taught in. If you don't mind sharing the example of that dragon tune you have, how did you sort of apply those concepts and like give that track a nice resolve as far as like what you actually did in the DAW from the production standpoint to like get across some of those ideas?
Yeah, so I haven't resolved that yet in terms of the writing. I've been working on the mix down. I haven't really changed the ending so much, but I have some ideas. But the first thing about this track is it. So the dragon, like the actual like sense of the dragon, that was actually synthesized, and it's synthesized with this preset we made in Evolution called the Throat Machine. And the Throat Machine is like, it's like a living synth. And the way I made it is it's got a pulse wave that goes all the way down to like zero pitch, like where it stops oscillating. So if you know anything about phase plant, there's a harmonic way to change pitch as well as a semitones way to change pitch. And the harmonic can go all the way to zero. And so it's set to zero, and then the macro knob, like the talk knob, goes upwards from there. And then it's also got a sub underneath it. And then the pulse wave that's not waving, you also have an FM knob to like cause that sub wave to like fold up in terms of this pulse wave, right? And what I was thinking about when I was thinking about designing that, I was thinking about like these low guttural, like throaty sounds where it's like, whoa. Right? And it's like these little pulses, right, shaped by your mouth, but these little pulses. And so I wanted to create something like that. And it turned out way better than I had ever thought. Like, it's so good. And so, and then I made like 50 different pulse wave tables, like, and they power this thing. So you can just go through all these different pulse waves and get all these different voices. Some of them are actually made out of animals. Like there's like, one that's like made out of a chicken, and you can get this like giant like mega chicken kind of thing going on and stuff. But so this dragon is actually like, it's like this growly dragon thing made from the Throat Machine, and I'm like, you know, modulating this talk knob so it's like growling, it's like, you know, and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, it's like you're in the cave with it. I like pumped up the reverb and some other things, and that's kind of like how I started that vibe. And then, yeah, so that's where like that originally came from. Then I put in like a bunch, it's got like a largely Japanese aesthetic in terms of the instrumentation. So there's like some taiko drums and like these koto glissandos and other stuff. And then I guess, well, first it started, it was like kind of the same. And then I was like, no, something wildly different needs to happen. I was talking to Tommy about, Sidecar Tommy, about how he goes about composition and arrangement. Like, where does he even come up with his ideas, right? Like for Beats Antiques tracks and stuff like that. And what he was saying is, that he'll often have completely different stuff. Like, it's like almost like taking two songs, and then he'll figure out, how do I connect A to B? And sometimes it'll be like you take an element of B and you put it into A so that you can introduce it. And maybe it's like some background thing, and then it like turns into the lead or something like that. And so I did that. I wrote this whole like middle section, and then I figured out how to connect the dots. And then, it builds up, and then this dragon comes back, and like you've got like this, second drop going on. And, but yeah, I haven't resolved the ending just yet. I think I might do it like a little bit more abruptly, like have like, it really climax, like get a lot more like combative and stuff. Towards the end, like a lot more, hard strikes with the drums, like, back and forth where it's like this strikes, kind of like dragony, like bass roar, like things that sound like rips and screeches, and at the end just kind of like scream outwards. And then like, it's, cause like right now it's like that you have like this last drop, and then you've kind of got like this drum outro, and it's like pretty standard, but it's like, what just happened? Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I just want to like leave the audience in this place of like, all this devastation just occurred. And then they're like, there's kind of like nothingness except for like the reverberations, like, in the wake of all that shit. So it's kind of like what my plan is for it.
I like that. I'm
Really
a big fan of like a large crescendo end of the last drop to just ring out impact, let the reverbs and the delays resolve themselves, and just be like, oh, that's the end of the song. No need for, and here's the drums again. Yeah,
exactly. And so there's just some things to do with it. Like I've got a lot of metal on metal kind of percussion elements and other things, but I want to like, a lot of these things are sitting more in the back, so I'm probably going to make a lot of those more like part of like the, I don't want to call it the melody line, but the lead, like use the percussion elements, and like metal on metal is very aggressive, right? Like whether it's like swords clashing or like there's it's implicitly threatening thing, right? Like if that makes sense, like
Totally.
hitting a dumpster or something like that. But yeah. So
hey, what that dumpster do to you?
Yeah. So that's like pretty much my plan for it. But I've been also like focusing on getting the mix a little bit deeper and some other things with it, and focusing on other songs too. I've got like a bunch of loose ends to finish up. This one is not going to be on my EP for the Dojo. I've got these. I've gone through so many rounds with Dylan, like not like so many, but a bunch of rounds with Dylan, and like he's starting to get like not very much feedback, but I'm trying to get these tracks like super, super crispy. And also, we've been starting Boombox Crush, so I've been putting off finishing Hidden Dragon for a minute. But
Dick, man.
finishing music is absolutely brutal. Anyone that tells you different, it's not finishing music that's near and dear to them, because actually finishing music is brutal. It takes so much more time and energy and like patience to get to that, like there's nothing else that you would ever want better. Like that is such a hard place to get to, especially for someone who like has a high standard for themselves. God, I really want to hear this dragon sound. It sounds so fascinating. I can't wait to hear that full song.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. I don't know what the sound sharing is like over Zoom. I mean, I do know what it's like over Zoom, and it's usually not great, but there are ways to make it. So do any of you have Faceplant?
No, not anymore.
I thought
about it. You don't even know. Dude,
I've been looking at it. I've been staring at it for Black Friday, and then I was like, no, I don't want to do a subscription. And then I looked at the Black Friday deal, and I was like, wait, the Black Friday deal is like not actually even as good as just their standard you could buy at any time subscription.
No, that's not true. You can actually get it for 200, and you get their not just phase plant, but their whole ultimate everything package. You can get it for 261 or 266 right now on JRR Shop with the coupon code forum or group. I can't remember whether it's forum or group, but one of those you can get it for either 261 or 266. And that's the cheapest that it's ever been.
That's really good.
Yeah. So that's a thing, but their subscription model isn't too bad. It's $10 a month, and if you think about it, that's still going to be like over 2 years before you end up paying that much.
That's exactly what I'm thinking, is that like, holy shit, like that is actually like a really long time to get the ultimate, which is I didn't know that you could get it for $260 anywhere, but because the ultimate's like $399 on sale or whatever. I'm like, that doesn't even really make sense compared to the subscription. But I mean, yeah, that being said, like, it's definitely one that I've been looking at for a while. It doesn't seem like a flash in the pan.
No, it's like I started using it at KJ Saka's recommendation, and if you actually look on the Kiloheart site, he made a demo track for them, and he's like right up on there for Phase Plant. But that, so he's homies with them, and that's how I got to introduce Evolution to them, like this Phase Plant bundle that we've been putting together as he introduced it. But when I got into it, and I was just like, my like nerdy rack programming and like all that stuff that I've been doing, and I'm like, wait a minute, you can have as many oscillators as you want. Wait, you can have as many copies of the effects and route them in any order. And then like, I think I was like on the fence of buying it, and then they announced that you're going to be able to put snap heap and multipass inside of Phase Plant, and I'm like, wait, are you kidding me? And then like I looked into that, and then I realized that you can have like that snap heap and multipass have automation, like modulators built into them. They have like envelopes and LFOs built right into them, right? So, and you can also drop them into your DAW, right? So I was like, holy shit, all these racks that I've been building, I can just build better ones that actually have like automations and stuff, build it, make it cross-platform. So if I want to go fuck around in Bitwig, I can, bring all my stuff with me. And so that's what really sold me on it, is when they put multipass and snap heap, just like the modularity of it. And so I'll like build these badass devices in snap heap or multipass, and then I'll like just drop them into my different presets, right? Whether it's like I built like this really nice tremolo, right? Not like a okay tremolo, but like a really nice one that tracks pitch and like will identify the different notes, and it'll wobble the low notes slower and the high notes faster. And it's got all these knobs to tweak, like, how much like all that stuff happens, and like the ducking before the tremolo kicks in and all this stuff. And now I have that, and I can even use it in Ableton, like on like a freaking serum patch or whatever. But yeah, so that's what really sold me. And the $10 a month subscription, it's worth noting that when you have, every year they'll give you $100 coupon from you. So it's like a kind of a rent to own thing that you can use to buy stuff. And the other thing is you get all the content bank stuff that they have for free with the subscription. So like Kill the Noise put out a pack, Andrew Wong put out a pack with them, some other people. But all those come with the subscription for free. They don't come with Ultimate when you buy it.
That was one of the other things that like made me go, well, I guess I'll just wait and like really think about it and decide if I want to get the subscription, because lifetime inclusions of literally everything that they make, including sound packs and like, I don't even know what I would spend $100 they give you on at that point, because they like kind of give you everything with the subscription.
Yeah, well, you can, eventually just buy their stuff, right? Like you can get, the other thing worth noting is you can get Phase Plant for $100. And even though you don't have all the snap-ins, like all their individual snap-ins, right? all of the all the presets in Phase Plant will work, whether they're yours or third parties. Like all of them will be fully functional.
That's
right.
tight.
Yeah. So you don't actually need all of it unless you're trying to build, stuff from scratch, which, is the best part. But, so you can get away with just having Phase Plant, and that you can get for $100. You can get their snap-ins, and they're adding new snap-ins. That's the other thing. Like they keep adding them. Like they just added one where it's a dynamics processor. It's got upwards and downwards compression, and you can throw that in multipass, and then you've got like OTT if you want, or like 5TT because it's like a 5-band multi-band thing.
Man, you inspired me to get Phase Plant again for sure.
Dude, it's so good.
I wanted to ask about Evolution. If I say favorite patch that you made for Evolution, which one comes to mind and why?
I don't know. I used to say the Throat Machine, and I love it so much. And that might be it. Just because, I don't know, there's a lot of good ones.
Dude, we need the demo on that sound. But even if you just play us 30 seconds of that song, I need the fucking demo of that sound.
Hold on. I've got you, first off, right? I've got an Inside the Throat Machine demo. I've actually got a Throat Machine sample pack that you can have it.
Man.
Hey.
Cool. And actually, if you hold on, there's also demos of it on Boombox Crush .us. If you go to boomboxcrush.us, you might have to go to you have to go to www.u because we're still resolving that with. If you go to www.boomboxcrush.us, there's a I don't know. I have to check with Dan to make sure. We haven't been putting this out because we've been making sure that our email fulfillment is working, and we had to like talk to Amazon to get out of their sandbox to make sure that like we can actually send out all these things. But there are some sound demos there, and there's a bunch of free stuff here basically that you can grab, including the Throat Machine for free. But yeah, also the mini Throat Machine sample pack, which has like 50, like we have like the full Throat Machine sample pack, like to discuss like the versatility of what you can accomplish with one instrument in Phase Plant if you really design it well. We've probably got like, I think it's like 500 different one-shots made out of this sample pack from a single preset. And not all of them are 100% different, but a lot of them are completely different. Some of them like sound like demonic machinery, like you're on some sort of like demon roller coaster thing. Like some of them sound like dragons or like ogres or like I said, mega chickens. Some of them are like, like laser blasters, and like some of them are like these metal monsters and stuff like that. There's like all these badass subs, all sorts of things, all from a single patch. Right.
Dude, this is crazy. Links in the description, obviously, for the listeners, and we're definitely going to blast this to the email list.
Amen. And just before we go, make sure you shout out the socials that you want people to follow you on, so that they can keep track of your journey wherever you're at.
Yeah, so I would say the biggest one is go to my YouTube channel, Missing Lynx Teaches Music. And then on all the video descriptions, you can get links to all the rest of the socials. And the new ones, at least, you'll be able to get to the Boombox Crush socials as well. And our Boombox Crush website, that's www.boomboxcrush.us. We've got a bunch of stuff dropping. Evolution, like I said, that's going to get pushed out by Kilohertz themselves. So they'll be pushing that on all their socials as well. That'll be available. I think we're dropping it for like $37 is what we decided on. And that's not only all the presets, it's also, we're putting together this one-shot pack. We just did a session at KMG Studios. And I've been like going with RX and getting all the samples nice and crispy, but that's going to be like 500 one-shots or something to power the sample oscillators, so that all the different presets like that, use samples, you can just go through these one-shots and be like, no, I want this. And so like the goal is like every single preset is a whole fucking world of sound. right? We've got the wavetable packs, we've got the LFOs, all that stuff. The synthesis course, the Throat Machine sample pack comes free with it too. And I might be forgetting stuff because we decided to put as much stuff together as possible and try and give a really good price for it.
Yeah,
That's a
something killer
steal.
deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh man.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Keep us in
yeah,
the
I'd say
loop.
the best place to go is Missing Lynx Teaches Music, and also the Boombox Crush YouTube channel is about to start. When you go there, there's not really any videos, but there are some unlisted videos we're about to put live.
Hey.
Sick. Yeah. Thanks, Alex, and keep us in the loop, and we're gonna do our best to stay updated with it because it's a super exciting project. And man,
Yeah, thanks so much. And I would love to have all of you guys on our channel, like do interviews and stuff with you there.
Yeah, happy
Introduce you
to.
to my subscribers. I got working the ways up. I got like about 2,000 subscribers now, so I'm sure they'd all love to hear about human music and all that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, we will be excited to talk to them.
Yeah, yes, please.
Beep boop.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, all right, all you human listeners out there, thanks so much for tuning in. Go follow Missing Lynx Teaches Music on YouTube. That's Missing LYNX Teaches Music. Super easy to find. And until next week, peace among worlds.
Woo.
I like it. What's up, humans? What a great episode. Thank you so much for being with us. Make sure to go check out Missing Lynx at Missing Lynx Teaches Music on YouTube. And of course, Boombox Crush. We have some links in the description for you. Another big shouts to our sponsors, Gvngaroo Music Distribution, Gvngaroo, unlimited distro, under $10. Because you should really be spending your money on promoting your music, not just getting it out on all the sites. That's the easy part, all right? Now, shouts out to The Approach with Seth Drake, where we all learn to mix 1,000 times better, and so can you. And of course, the Producer Dojo, where you still have a few days left to join the Remix Your Life Challenge. But even if you're listening to this after January 8th, click the link in the description, because even without this challenge, it is the absolute best place to go learn music production and how to remix your life, even if you're not doing it at the very beginning of 2021 when I'm speaking. All right? Appreciate y'all, humans. Be very well. Happy New Year. Stay safe out there. Peace and peace among worlds.